Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on our third Tuesday in 3 webcast series event, Work from Home Action Plan. My name is Alan Falcon. I'm the CEO and Pragmatic Evangelist here at Cumulus Global. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us here today. And I apologize for those who are watching this live. I apologize for getting started a few minutes late. We had a last-minute software update for our webcast system that auto-applied. Had to wait for that to finish before I could get on, so I appreciate the patience. Just as a reminder for everyone, if you haven't been in our sessions before, the audio is always muted to prevent background noise. So if at any point in time you've got questions about the content or a comment, along the top or right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a couple icons. Click on the one that opens the questions window. We'll answer them as we go along. We have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session as well. The session is being recorded, will be posted up within 24 hours, and we'll get you a link as well as some additional follow-up information. Feel free to share that with folks who might find the content valuable. Other events and resources around this topic and others, as always, visit our blog for our recent blog posts. We've got some website updates as well, specifically with the new rollout of Google Workspace that's happening this quarter and next. There's good overview and version comparison information if that's something of interest. And of course, all of our webcast recordings are available. And if you have a question, we're happy to schedule a no obligation, free, complimentary call with one of our cloud advisors to talk you through issues you're having, point you in the right direction, share information, and provide some other ideas. So with that, would like to get directly into some of the content here today and get forward as we look at work from home. And I thought it'd be helpful to start with a little bit of a situational analysis of where we are with respect to work from home. And trying to get, oftentimes studies and these types of things are done and there's a lag time before they make it out. And so there's a lot of information that's a little dated. And by a little dated, I mean a year or two old, which in normal times would still be quite relevant. But given the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of the pandemic, things have changed a little more rapidly than they normally do. So Stanford economist Nicholas Bloom, back at the end of June in 2020, was interviewed. He's done a number of studies over the years about remote work and working from home. And he was asked to sort of take a look at the current situation. And that's probably the most, best researched and most current information I could dig out over the last week or so. And what he pointed out is that today, it's important to know that 33% are not working and 26% are employed and working at the office, meaning that 42% of the U.S. labor force right now is working from home full-time or the majority of their time. And the feedback from those at-home workers is that they feel they're about 80% efficient. At the same time, only 51% of employees feel they can work from home effectively. Now, we don't have the the cross-reference to know of those 42 working at home, what percentage feel they can work efficiently or are versus those working in the office who think they could be more efficient or as efficient if they worked at home. An interesting statistic also to think about is, only 65% of U.S. workers have sufficient internet access at home to do tasks such as multi-party audio conferencing or video conferencing, attending video meetings. And so, so working at home presents some challenges in that regard as well, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. When asked about his expectations, given, I think a lot of businesses have come to realize, and a lot of individuals, that people can do their jobs from home; they don't have to be in the office. He sort of set some expectations, and he expects the share of work from home days to increase as much as 20% on a permanent basis. And he also is projecting a long-term drop in demand for urban office space by about 25%. Now, he goes on to note that we expect to see additional demand for small office space or remote offices in suburbans and rural locations. So it's not just that the commercial office market's going to tank everywhere. Some areas will benefit, other areas will see some degradation and some loss. And so we also take a look at some impact. I came across a great article in the October issue of The Atlantic, which was titled Generation Work from Home May Never Recover. And this looks at some of the non-technical sort of social and personal aspects of folks working from home. And it's very clear, and this should come as no surprise, that people who work from home are best if they're folks who can manage flexibility, manage their time, and they value that flexibility. And that flexibility could be what tasks they work on when. It could even be, depending on their job, when they're working and when they're on personal time. And they're comfortable with that boundary between home life and work life being a little more blurry. When you have individuals who want or need better boundaries, whether that's between when I'm at work and when I'm at home, even though I'm physically in my house all the time, or whether it's when can I be working alone, when do I need to be in meetings, what's expected of me. If you have individuals who want or need those boundaries or that structure, they tend to struggle in the work at home. But there are also some broader implications for our workplace and for individuals as we look at this move to work from home and the expectation that it's going to be more permanent than one might have thought just 6 months or 9 months ago. The first is that individuals who have existing strong social and professional networks can do well with the lack of the face-to-face communications. When we talk about face-to-face, it's not just meetings, it's what we'll call casual encounters or incidental encounters, being in the break room at the same time, passing in a stairway or a hallway, heading in and out of the cafeteria or in and out of the building for lunch, being able to walk over to someone's office and ask a question. We talk about over the cube wall type of conversations. For individuals who don't have those strong networks within the workplace or with peers at other firms, they may be more likely to feel alienated and a bit isolated. And what really happens as we move from in-person to remote work and working from home, we as individuals lose those quick encounters that really do build a sense of belonging and warmth, right? So, examples of those encounters, I said, I'm getting coffee, you're getting coffee. We're in the break room. Maybe you ask me about a project. Maybe you ask me, what's going on. I ask how your kids are doing in school, or if your son's playing basketball again this winter. Those types of quick encounters and interpersonal build that sense of community and warmth. And what really happens is, because we're so used to those types of interpersonal interactions, when you have new hires or younger workers who work remotely, most or all of the time, they remain unknown quantities for a longer period of time. So yes, they may be doing a great job in their work, but you're missing that personal connection that's so important in our human and our work relationships. And so there's studies coming out that are showing that those full-time remote workers, particularly if they're new to the organization or in the younger age demographics, other workers never really see them as colleagues. And there is an indication that they see fewer promotions and less wage growth than people who work on premise or who've built those social and professional networks because they're more well known, they're more seen as colleagues and part of the team and integrated in the company. And so as we look forward to work from home, there's some pretty significant impacts for an organization as well as individuals. Now, obviously here, this article focused on the individual nature and isolation and potential impact on livelihood and future with your company. But at the same time, if you are a manager, you're an owner, and you've got employees who don't feel part of the team, they don't feel like they're colleagues with their coworkers, then you are facing a situation where you're losing productivity and you're losing interaction and you're losing the common sense of purpose that can impact productivity of the whole company and can impact your bottom line. Okay, so a third study we'll look at really quickly, and then we'll start talking about some to-dos and some other aspects of this. There's a company called ProtoScore that has productivity monitoring tools, and they, back in March and April, as the pandemic was really spreading and lockdowns were happening, particularly in the more urban centers, they did a series of surveys of about 30,000 of the users of their system, gathering about 100 million data points from their monitoring. And what they found is that when you work from home or the majority of work becomes remote, certain things increase. Telephone use, use of CRM activity, CRM systems to track communications, tasks, and next thing, email, and even chat. What decreases, interestingly enough, is document access and meetings. Now, it's not surprising that people are having fewer meetings because you're not proximate. You can't just walk over to the conference room. It's a little more logistics, and video meetings are more difficult to manage and attend and participate in than in-person meetings. But what was also interesting is that document access decreases. And that decrease of 26% is pretty significant because that's oftentimes how people collaborate. Hey, we're working on this document together. How's that going to happen? So when we look at work from home, and in the description of the session, I talked about a number of issues we have to address. And I'm going to start with one that's less tangible, but very important for the operation of your business, which is governance, right? Because when we talk about governance, we talk about some specific needs that we have. The first comes for many of us here on the call and who will be watching this webcast is compliance. And there's regulatory compliance, and that's both a technical issue and a non-technical issue. And so we're talking about solutions around HIPAA compliance for employee or customer, personal health information, PII compliance. You've got, CCPA in California, GDPR if you do business and have customers in Europe. All those compliance needs still exist even when all of your data and systems aren't on premise and behind your firewall, so to speak. You also need to maintain your compliance with your own business policies, and this is harassment, use of technology, appropriate behavior, internal policies about data retention and storage, and customer information protection, which feeds into governance over security of your information systems and protection of your data. And so we recommend as you move to have work from home or more broadly remote work as a standard part of your business, that there are really 3 reviews and updates that you have to do: policies and procedures, security practices, infrastructure, and your data protection services. And we'll go through those pretty quick right now. So first up is policies and procedures. Hopefully everyone here has confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements with their employees. And when we talk about updating policies and procedures, you can have those in place, but now that people are working outside of the office, and so information may be on a mobile device, you may be allowing people to use home computers to access their work and do their work. You need to have procedures in place that help you avoid accidental disclosures, and that you need to make sure you're still in compliance with your regulatory requirements, as some of those regulations have pretty strict stipulations on how and where data is stored and how, where, and when it's transmitted. Secondly, we recommend that every business have an appropriate use of technology policy, which basically talks about what is an appropriate use of company resources and technologies for business, and can get into issues of when is it appropriate to use personal devices and tools, when is it not, and hopefully establishes a policy and procedures for segregating business and personal services and data, right? So, most of us no longer carry a work cell phone and a home, personal cell phone. So on that cell phone is a mix of apps and data. I have it too. Some really are my personal ones. Others really do belong to the business. We need to make sure that we have management and control over those, and they're segregated, both at the policy level, the procedures, and how people operate, and the underlying technology. And so that brings us to the next policy we recommend is really use of personal device. So when, why, and how is it acceptable, and what type, in exchange for being able to use a personal device, what type of access and data protections do you need your employees to have on that device in place that give the company control over the company's applications and data, not necessarily or hopefully not including the personal applications and data. And finally, and this really gets a little bit, into sort of the new modes of communication, which is, we recommend procedures in promoting best practices and having discussions with your employees about communications in general. and collaboration. And when should you be doing video conference or video call? When should you use the phone? What's appropriate for chat and what's appropriate for email? And these don't have to be strong policies other than just sort of recommended. And obviously you want to be sensitive to the preferred communication method of the people you're working with. But there are certain things that may not be appropriate for chat that you'd want to see in email as a more formal means of communication. You may be archiving email, you may not be archiving chat. And certainly, given the physical and mental drain involved in video-based meetings, guidance on when you really need to meet and have that video or when the work can be accomplished using another means of communication and collaboration. And so helping people work through that. The next area of governance is our security practices. And with that, it's really, your business is beyond your walls now. It's been that way for a while. This is not new to anyone. And so really the method and the thought process is to secure each employee and everything each employee does, so all they do. And so when you think about devices, any device that's outside of your physical office, think of that as a mobile device, right? Maybe it's a smartphone or a tablet, maybe it's a laptop, but maybe it's a desktop that an employee's taken home or you sent to them, or they're using their personal desktop for work when they're at home. Those are all mobile devices because they're not in your physical control, behind your physical protections. You need to protect them using software and management procedures and practices. The next area of security to look at, sort of a holistic view, is your infrastructure, which is who has access to your network and your systems, what controls do you have, and how are you identifying and managing people's identities and actions. And applications, whether they're running local on that machine or they're, they're running as software as a service or cloud-based services, or you're remoting into your network to access applications that are running on-premise in your physical premise. Multi-factor authentication for security, single sign-on. Single sign-on makes it easier for the end user. The multi-factor authentication makes it more secure. And so combining those two, you can get a really good balance there. You need to protect your data, right? And the concept here is that the data should be secure not only when it's in motion. So it's not enough to say, hey, the VPN connection I have from my desktop to the server in the office is encrypted. So when I upload a file or download a file, it's encrypted. You need it protected at rest as well, because you have to worry about the device itself and dangers that could happen, whether it's ransomware or malware that might attempt to read data off the local hard drive that could get in place. So in most regulatory requirements about data protection now expect encryption in motion and at rest. And that in motion, again, can be file transfers, it can be emailing, it's the whole gamut there. And finally, think about the processes that people do and the workflows they have, and the manual ones and the automated, and making sure that those are secure as well with the right, with secure access and entry points and secure permissions, so that the difference between someone having edit privileges in a document versus comment or suggest privileges is significant, even more so restricting someone to view, or having documents with security permissions that are, if they're highly confidential and sensitive, that can't be forwarded, that can't be printed, that can't be downloaded, where you block screenshots if possible. And so think about your processes and how data works flow, data and workflows move through as people do their daily job, and see where and when those processes, looking at permissions, access lists, workflow automation, warrant additional security, given that people are working outside your physical environs. Third area of government and policies and procedures is data protection. And so here we've outlined 6 areas of data protection that are important for any organization. And most people, have, backup and recovery. It's something we've had in place since we started having, individual computers and then local area networks and local file servers. It's pretty well understood that you need to back up your servers. And obviously backing them up to the cloud has advantages to backing them up to local tape or local disk, etc. Keep in mind that when you put data in the cloud itself, your cloud provider, whether it's Microsoft with 365 or Google with Google Workspace, formerly G Suite, that those vendors are, yes, they're backing up their systems in your environment, but the purpose of their backups is to provide continuity of service. Both Google and Microsoft and most SaaS vendors point out that you have a shared responsibility for protecting your data. And Microsoft in their licensing agreement actually recommends that users implement their own data backup and recovery service. Why? Because if you're using the OneDrive client and syncing files to OneDrive or to SharePoint file services, and you get hit with cryptoware and your files on your local hard drive get encrypted, those encrypted files are going to synchronize and update and thereby make encrypted the version of the files that are mirrored up in the cloud, right? So having the cloud doesn't prevent those types of things from happening. It doesn't prevent people from accidentally deleting, overwriting. It doesn't, prevent applications from having errors that cause file corruption. All of those things still happen. And so just like you want to back up and be able to restore files on a file server or on your local machine, you want to be able to get your cloud resident data back into the cloud and back available to you. And you want to be able to recover from issues and small issues or large disasters in that way. We talk about security and compliance. That's a mix of encryption, threat protection, archive and compliant archive and e-discovery services, and even, depending on the nature of your business, continuity services that make sure that you're able to operate in the face of threats or otherwise downtime. Endpoint protection, next-gen AI-supported advanced heuristics to look for malware, viruses, other problems that come on your devices, and not just your laptops and your PCs, but your smartphones and tablets as well these days. Data loss protection to manage permissions and access, prevent accidental or intentional data leaks. Those types of losses and breaches can destroy your business, not just from a technical and data and operational standpoint, but it can create marketing, customer relationship, and financial issues. DNS and web protection. DNS attacks is a great way for someone, just because you're you or you're randomly picked or there's a deliberate target out for your business. DNS attacks can impact your ability to access the internet and send and receive emails and do other online functions. And web protection, just because we know that websites get hacked and malware gets downloaded when web pages are visited, even from trusted websites. And finally, the human factor component, right? That you and your employees are in fact your greatest security risk. The best way to keep a business secure and all your information secure is never to let anyone go home or talk to anyone outside the business. And so when we deal with human beings and we deal with the fact that scammers and cyber thieves right now are very sophisticated using behavioral psychology, that communicating with your staff, providing training and education and reinforcement not only encourages healthy behaviors, it can mitigate risk by identifying people or actions that may cause problems so you can provide further education and guidance. And it's all part of that holistic system. So the next aspect of work from home we want to talk about after governance is collaboration and how we work together. And the two salient facts is that for white collar, for knowledge workers is probably a better terminology, 80% of the time is spent on work that involves collaboration. And at the same time, we know from recent studies, currently 50% of our active employees are working remotely. And so that puts a lot of demand on people, for people who are working remotely to be able to collaborate effectively. And so when we look at traditional collaboration in the workspace, what do we think of? We think of, oh, I'm going to send you an email with a document to review. Oh, let's get together in the conference room or in the break room for 10, 15 minutes or an hour or 6 hours to talk things through. Let's do a conference call and work through the document and the feedback. But we also are used to, and as I mentioned earlier, those informal meetings, the over the cube wall discussion, the casual interactions where you may be asked a question or someone might share an idea. Currently, those formal meetings now, they still may be calls, but they're more apt to be video sessions, right? Between Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, right? WebEx. Some of us feel like we're living our day online with that, camera zoomed in, at headshot distance, right? You're still seeing email for sharing and requests. That informal communication, in many cases, has moved to chat, sometimes to phone. And we're now starting to see better adoption of in-document collaboration. And this is particularly available in Google Workspace, where you have live interactive collaboration. You have that now as well in the Microsoft 365 suite when people are using the compatible tools. And so the nature of how we collaborate is different because we're no longer face-to-face. And again, that has some, some disadvantages and some advantages here. And I want to talk about sort of what's missing. And we keep talking about that face-to-face and the over-the-wall communications, those casual interactions and the interpersonal connection. And I can't overstate this, that this is a significant issue because it affects not only how well people can collaborate, it affects how they're communicating, how they're building relationships, how they're establishing trust. And so the risk with the way we're currently collaborating is that people, individuals, and even teams might feel excluded from the work they're doing or the projects they're on or the broader mission and purpose of the company or their department. We have a risk of missing opportunities and ideas that would otherwise bubble up or come through those informal or casual interactions. And for many organizations, you run the risk of losing your sense of team, an individual or shared sense of purpose, that sense of belonging, and even a self-perception of value to the organization. In talking with small business owners, we've talked to a number who've said, that if they've had employees come to them and say they're thinking of leaving, that's why. Well, I don't think I'm really contributing anymore, right? That loss of the casual conversation was a loss of feedback of how they were working and navigating and interacting with the rest of the organization. So those individual employees start to feel that they weren't valued or that they weren't able to offer value to the organization. And so when we think about the things that are missing and the risks that are included, we want to make sure that we provide mechanisms to make up for what's missing in a way that helps avoid some of these risks. And that leads us into wellness. And and wellness takes on several points. There's physical wellness and there's emotional and mental health wellness. And so we want to be holistically, right? So physical challenges with people working at home. Actually, there's some studies out that have been done in the last 6 months. They're talking about, depending on individuals, there's either better diet, more exercise, or there's less. But we also hear from employers that there's a higher degree of physical strain. And what does that mean? Well, people are sitting in their chairs longer because they're not going up to the break room, or the chair they're in isn't as good, or their desk environment isn't ergonomically correct. And so eye strain and back strain become an issue. The bigger challenges, I don't want to minimize the physical health challenges, but the bigger challenges come when people's mental health and their emotional well-being. And again, it's easy to feel alienated, excluded, or isolated when you're working from home and you're physically alone much of the time, no matter how many Zoom meetings you have or Hangout meets or Teams meetings you have throughout the day. And that sense of belonging, the perception of value, can also be a struggle because the nature of our communications and our collaboration is training. And so there are documented increases in levels of anxiety and depression. And those come not only from direct workplace impacts, but in the current work from home situation around COVID-19, there's external factors such as uncertainty about the economy, uncertainty about job security. There can be other financial burdens. There are logistical burdens that are happening now with parents working from home while students are working in school remotely in their home. A lot of logistics and a lot of stress on our employees, on their families, on their friends and associates. So there's some actions we can do as business owners and business leaders, even when our companies are small. So first is talk to your team and set expectations about group and personal interactions. And and the need to not have every communication in the company strictly be about work or the task at hand. You want to create mechanisms for those informal communications and the informal collaborations that breed so much value into our work relationships, our sense of well-being and community and team. And as we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, even those types of communications that end up fostering innovation and creativity. And the third action is to monitor and support employee well-being. And it's not enough just to say, "Are you okay?" or "How are things?" Right? Because it's always easier just to say, "I'm fine," than it is to explain what the issue is or share that there's an issue. So here's some ideas about well-being that we've collected over the last several weeks as we were preparing for this webcast. And I guess I would say the overall motto here is do good as a leader, is do good, be good, and have fun, and encourage and involve your employees in doing the same. And so when it comes to meetings, we shouldn't have to say this, but clear agenda shared in advance with goals and objectives for the meetings is important. Let people know why you're meeting. Is it worthwhile? Is it important enough for that time and for the effort involved in video meetings? Because it is, and I'll reiterate this, I said it earlier, it takes more energy, mental and physical, to do a video meeting than it does an in-person meeting, because you're dealing with the logistics of the meeting. You're seeing yourself. You can't see full body language and reaction. It's harder to interpret. In a normal meeting, there's a flow of conversation. People can talk over each other. Online meetings, only one mic is ever active, and you only hear one person at a time. So you don't hear two people talking. You hear one person cutting off or over-speaking another. So there's that stress involved. So having a clear agenda and objective sets the stage. We recommend using short meetings where instead of scheduling a half-hour meeting, scheduling a 30-minute meeting, 50 minutes instead of a full hour. And with that, build in social time, 5 to 10 minutes before or after the work portion of the meeting begins, where people come in and they get settled in. It's not uncommon when we were in person and meeting in a conference room to say, hey, we're meeting at 10 o'clock. Some people are there 3 to 5 minutes early. Some walk in right at 10. Some might walk in a minute or two after. It generally takes a minute or two to get going if the meeting's at 10. And so in those few minutes before the meeting, there's, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Did you hear this? Did you see that? What did you think about that show last night? Those type of quick conversations happen that help build those interpersonal connections. And you can provide that structure even when your meeting's online. We're also seeing a lot of success in small businesses. I've talked to a number of owners who do this. We're doing this even before moving online with meetings, where they try to engage everyone in the meeting at the onset. So they'll start with an intro. So maybe, I spoke with one business leader who says every single meeting they go around to everyone involved and in 2 words answer the question, how are you doing? Right? So it's usually an adjective and a noun. Sometimes it's an adverb and a verb or 2 adjectives. Doesn't matter. In 2 words, how are you doing? It gives everyone a sense, right? Another technique we've seen to sort of break the ice and engage is to play 2 truths and a lie. And each meeting, particularly if it's a regularly standing meeting, each meeting you pick someone else to make 3 statements. 2 of them are true, 1 of them is a lie. You go around the room, see if people can guess which one is the lie. It helps people get to know each other, see how well they know each other. It's actually a fun way to introduce newer team members to other team members in a very human and connective way. And and another technique that we've seen very successful in small businesses we worked with is go around and say, whether it's particularly for team meetings where you're talking about status, is 1 success and 1 goal. What's your success been since our last meeting? What's your goal between now and the next meeting? And that tends to be more work related than some of these other methods. So it helps people focus, but it also gives people sense of what they're working on and how it fits with everyone else. Another thing that's been suggested is to have your employees schedule breaks, or as a company schedule a break. Say, hey, look, every day from 3 to 3:30 or from 3 to 4 p.m., there are going to be no meetings. You're not allowed to schedule meetings. You might want to use that to catch a breather. You might want to use that to get to clean out your inbox or finish tasks before you go home. But scheduling breaks where there's no meetings can help people structure their time and day so it's not back-to-back video meetings, phone calls, and other sessions. And don't forget, as a manager and supervisor, to do things like checking in. And when you check in, again, it's not just that the question should be open-ended. You want to ask questions that can't be answered with yes, no, or a single word. You want leading questions. So it can't be, how are you doing today? Oh, fine. You want to ask questions like, is there anything right now that's causing you stress or anxiety I might be able to help with? Right? Or, is everything in the household good? Or do you need time to deal with anything? You want to ask those leading questions to draw out concerns and issues. And you also want to be clear how you can help. And how you can help can be, very different. Early on in the pandemic, we were able to get some of our employees supplies that they couldn't buy in the local grocery store because we have commercial purchasing accounts with distributors. And so we let employees know, hey, if you need things like A, B, C, D, and E, let us know. We should be able to get them and ship them to your house. And we did that for folks, right? Another great thing about well-being, another great idea here, is I'll keep this moving, is create social events. Right now, again, this does mean people getting online and being in that virtual meeting again, but by doing facilitated virtual events around a social activity, you can do a lot of fun. And sometimes it can be formal. So I participate in a conference advisory board. Since we weren't meeting in person, we missed, there would always be a social event in the meeting after our day-long, at the end of the day after our day-long meeting. Since we were meeting online, they couldn't do that. So instead, everyone took an hour break and we came back and reconvened online. And they had a celebrity chef get on. They had sent us ingredients in advance and gave us a cooking lesson. And everyone did it from their kitchen at home. Everyone's mic was on. We talked. We got to know each other. It was a social event. It was fun. We had filet and lobster tails. Now, that's a big production, hiring an outside service to get the ingredients to everyone at the right time and to get a chef, everything. But you can do something similar. We've had, companies with employees who, are wine collectors, and, they'll do a wine tasting where the company will send out, 3 different bottles and people can, do a little tasting at home as a social event. We've seen baking lessons. We've seen virtual card games. We've seen companies have video game tournaments as a way of facilitating those social interactions that might happen in the workplace that aren't happening now. Another idea is to have open door time. I've talked to a couple of business owners who tell me this is extremely effective. They'll put it on their calendar a couple times a week, a block of an hour or two. They'll call it open door, and they'll simulate them being in their office with the door open, which basically means they're in a meeting. Everyone has the link to the meeting. They're going about doing their work, but their camera and their microphone is on. And if someone wants to pop their head in, all they have to do is join the meeting for a minute, and they can pop their head. And if they need privacy, they go off into a separate meeting or into a private room for a couple minutes and provide that accessibility. It's almost like having office hours online. And finally, good deeds. Most companies that we work with, that we know, do something in their community that benefits the community. They give back in some way. And so here's an opportunity to rethink what that might mean for your company. So think about participatory activities and events that people can do from home with different charities. And also think about, this is something that we've done here at Cumulus Global, and I know, and I've talked to other business owners and leaders who've done this successfully there, is support individual efforts. Ask each employee, maybe instead of writing the big check to one charity that the company sponsored, you ask employees how they want to give back locally, and that's where you can get into matching or supporting those activities and help the employees do the good deed and feel the reward of giving back to their communities and participating in their community as well. So a lot of things you can do to help foster well-being, build camaraderie, create those social interactions, and help people participate in their broader community in a positive way. And so, you know, I'm not sure if all of those are really innovative, but let's talk a little bit about innovation now, right? Most of the time, you know, yes, there are companies that'll come in and they'll put your team in a room and they'll do an innovation workshop for 3 days. And if you're really, really lucky at the 3 days, you have one good actionable idea. Most innovation is organic, right? It comes from the result of those casual conversations, interactions between people. When individuals are connecting dots because of their interactions with different challenges, successes, ideas, questions, and thoughts in different people. And that's hard to simulate when you're not all in the same place, where the nature and the number of those casual interactions becomes limited. So if your business wants to continue to innovate, the first thing we recommend, and we've talked to a couple experts on this, is be honest and open about that. Say, hey, look, here's where the business is. Here's what we want to go. We need ideas. We need to figure some things out, right? And maybe it's not looking for the best new thing that you're going to sell or do. Maybe it's improving a process or rethinking how you're engaging with certain types of customers for additional revenue or additional loyalty. Be honest and open about the challenges and the needs and where you think the business is maybe not even struggling, but just you want it to improve. And be honest and open about your plans and your visions and how that happens. Oftentimes, it's not uncommon for business leaders to say, hey, we want to work on this without providing the context. Provide that context. And then you can do things like, even though we're remote and online for meetings, you can facilitate knowledge sharing, setting up a wiki, playing Q&A, formal whiteboarding sessions, which you can do very easily electronically now within Google Meet and Teams, one-on-one and small group conversations, even assigning tasks so that people block off time to think and explore and research, can all help structure in a way that you can build some of the communication channels that allow organic innovation to happen, and you can also facilitate the thought process and keep the fact that you want innovation, you want creativity, you want new ideas flowing, build a structure that encourages that and helps that happen. So the final thing I want to talk about is workspaces, and this isn't as exciting as innovation. It's not often seen as critical as emotional and mental well-being, employee health and well-being. It's not as trendy as collaboration in our use of online meetings and technologies, but nonetheless, it's important. And the first thing is just a heads up, right? That as an employer, you're responsible for your employees' workspace and work environment, regardless of where that is. And so the first thing to understand, there's a difference between, when employees are remote, there's a difference between being in a remote office, which is a space that's designed to be an office, maybe it's a workspace location or shared office suite, something like that, versus a home office, which is a space set up specifically to be an office used that way on a regular and planned basis that has the features and amenities of office space, whether in your building or in a remote office location, versus working from home. So working from home, think about that as occasional, right? Oh, once or twice a month, I got to bring some work home, so I just, I can sit on the family room couch and slouch with my laptop in my lap and the fire going in the fireplace, or, sitting in the room while the kids are watching TV. I'm not that distracted, right? Or sitting in the kitchen and doing some work while, the family's, cleaning up from dinner, whatever. That's the occasional thing, right? So the work environment isn't as critical because it's not a normal activity. But when you start talking about working from home on a regular basis, you need that home office, right? As an employer, you're still responsible for OSHA compliance and ergonomics, which includes things like sizing of the workspace, placement of computer equipment and other devices for ergonomics and physical health, the amount of lighting, the style of lighting, all of that comes into play. And you have to worry about things. If I'm just working at home because I need to get a couple hours of work done once in a while, that's one thing. If I'm, working my normal business day at home, I have to worry about distractions. I have to worry about sound and quiet, particularly since we're doing online meetings. Privacy. If I'm turning on the video camera to be in a meeting, what are people seeing, right? And I know everyone does those backgrounds, but let's face it, the backgrounds aren't great unless you're providing everyone with green screens. And having that virtual background is actually distracting and can be extremely distracting to other members of the meeting. And it isn't always necessarily a good idea. So having a setup that provides privacy and then having the resources in place to be effective and efficient in their work. And so we look at best practices for Workspace. We're looking at first setting up some expectations, right? Is that you're setting up, if people are going to be working from home on a regular basis, you want to set the expectation that you're setting up a home office. And it's not the casual, oh, I'm going to work from home type of environment. And so you want a good place to work. You want a desk space, seating, a little bit of storage that might be necessary. You want the right technology as far as phone, computer, internet access and internet access speed. You want good lighting and you want privacy, physical privacy as well as visual privacy as well as audio privacy. And that comes to that sort of quiet space that you might need. And think about it. In a sense, as the business owner, your employee in setting up that home office, direct and indirectly, there's expense, right? So as an employer, a best practice is to quote unquote pay your rent. What does that mean? It could mean reimbursement or a stipend to deal with things such as ensuring that there's enough internet and access speed, contribution to utilities, and we here at Cumulus Global, we have an office environment where there's food, where the company buys, stocks drinks and snacks, and sometimes provides lunches and things of that nature. Don't stop doing that just because your employees are home. So a stipend or a periodic grocery delivery with snacks and drinks, or the periodic work lunch where you send employees the gift card and you buy lunch for employees and they have it delivered to their house during a meeting. Things of that nature help make the work home office experience so much better. On the ergonomic side, again, you want to create that workspace. And so one of the things we've seen very effective is things like monitor stands, CPU shelves, can take a smaller desk space and make it more usable and more functional and feel less cluttered and cramped and more conducive to working longer hours. Many businesses have put sit-stand desks or adapters in their office environment. If you've got employees who are used to standing part of the day, make sure they have that ability to do it at home as well. We partner with some great companies that offer these solutions at an affordable rate. We can get you demo equipment, no obligation. There are all sorts of incentives. It's easy to do. You're not going to break your budget. Next, you want to have a setup and accessories that prevent employee health issues. So when we talk about things like carpal tunnel syndrome, back strain issues, and eyesight issues, you're talking about screen size and brightness, lighting, wrist rests for keyboards and mice if you have mouse users still, if they're not using trackpads, appropriate furniture as far as desk chair, appropriate height of your desk, etc. All of those things come into play. Just as you would make sure the physical office in your office is good, you want to ensure that the physical office in your employee's home offices is good. And finally, with so much happening in video meetings, you want everyone to look and sound good. It reduces stress and strain when people are on video meetings. So providing some mechanism for full spectrum or ring lights that avoid the shadows and provide a healthy light, providing mics and headsets or headphones that have microphones built in, not only provides noise cancellation and privacy, but better audio quality. And if you've been in a meeting with 20 people and everyone's on speakerphone, or on just the laptop mic and speakers, you get echoey sound, you've got volume control issues. Having people on, with a headset or headphones and a microphone makes a world of difference. And finally, think about privacy screens to put people, that people might need behind their workspace so the video camera isn't shining into their living room, or green screens to have an effective, background image that isn't as choppy and isn't as distracting. All of these things come into play, and you can make people more comfortable with what they're doing and how they're working remotely. And the quality of their home office, they'll be more productive, and they'll be more engaged. So what are the action items? I've covered a lot of ground, and we're nearing the top of the hour. So feel free, now's the time if you have questions, open that questions window and start asking. But what are what's the action plan, right? So the first step in the action plan is to assess, right? Given where you are, given where your employees are working, what you expect your business may look like for the next 12 months, the next 3 years, do you expect everyone back in the office as things clear up, this coming spring and summer, hopefully? Or do you expect some people will want to, and are you comfortable with some people staying work from home? We know businesses whose leases were coming up over the summer and they decided not to renew at all, and they've gone completely virtual. And in this coming summer, they'll decide what type of office space they need, when and where they need it, right? So what are your objectives and your desired outcomes? And let that drive your needs and your preferences. And don't just focus on needs. Think of how you prefer to work. So you might not feel you need everyone on site, but you might prefer that people are on site a couple days a week. For those casual interactions that are so important and for the sense of camaraderie and community. Then define the value proposition. Actively choose when, why, and how staff will work remotely. And create that plan and with the shared outcomes, and share those outcomes with your staff. This is our plan. This is how we're going to, this is what we're going to do. And that plan should include all of the considerations we have, right? It's not just, hey, we're going to let people work from home if you want to. That's great. Clap your hands, shake hands, hoorah, let's go. Say, hey, look, if you're comfortable working from home and you feel you're productive, excellent. This is what we're going to do. We're going to step back and make sure your office environment is appropriate for you and that you're well cared for there. And we're going to make sure that as you're working from home, we've got a plan to make sure we don't lose you or lose sight of you, that you're still going to be involved socially, you're still going to have those interactions with the company so that you know where you fit in, that you're part of the team, that you're a known entity, that you're fully engaged, and that you still have, and we foster those relationships with your coworkers. And then you have to execute. And that's leveraging your resources for success. And hopefully you'll see that Cumulus Global is a resource for your success in this regard. And so with that, I do want to open it up to folks if any questions. I know we're right at the top of the hour. And again, I apologize that we got going a few minutes late. What I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to stop the recording of the webcast. So for those who are watching this as a recording, I want to thank you for tuning in and taking time out. We probably will receive a notification you viewed the webcast. We'll be in touch to follow up to see if you have any questions or if we can help you in any way.